Hi, this is Paul, and most of you, this guy needs no introduction. This is John Van Donk, and he is the sort of the co-founder of me, of Estuary, and Midwestuary was just completed last weekend, and I think it was a great success, and people are all ready to go and start their own estuaries, and John Van Donk says, "Whoa." You might be a little, he wants to do some expectation adjustments. So, okay, John, say your piece.
Well, well, I got to thinking, because it was an amazing time and amazing conversations were had, and I heard all kinds of reports of how well our leaders did to navigate the protocol and have people welcomed into a meaningful conversation. I thought it was an all around terrific experience, but this was a unique audience in the sense that these are all people that are already familiar with the main players, the main characters in the TLC and in the broader network of people that gather for this conference. And so now they go around and they say, I want to find my own place to talk about these things. Well, what are these things? So these things mean something different for the folks that are familiar with your channel and familiar with the TLC or the Flotilla and all the other channels. And so when you start gathering, when you start looking for people around the world, or even just in this country that are familiar with that, sometimes the distance, the geographical distance between people that are familiar with these things can be quite large. And in an average city, you may not find a ready audience, that you can just quickly gather and proceed as we did at the conference. So you have to kind of figure on gathering a different audience for whom these things may be a totally different thing, as you well know in your church estuary.
I don't know. I talked to a fair amount of people and asked them about their estuary groups. And a fair my recollection is that there were a decent percentage of people that came to that conference. Maybe they had listened to one person or another, but there are a fair number of people that came to that conference who enjoyed their estuary group experience, but didn't necessarily have a lot of background. So there's sort of TLC stuff, which is kind of downstream from me, and then there's Vervaeke stuff, and then there's Peugeot stuff, and then of course there's Dreer and Elizabeth Oldfield audiences, many of whom probably came to the conference with zero understanding
Minimal experience, yeah.
of this stuff. And then there are people who come to the conference with no background in any of this whatsoever. And so while, it is, I mean, you and I have spoken a lot about sort of the difference between, let's say, people who watch my videos and normies who come to Estuary. I agree with you that in some ways, what we set up with these conferences is an ideal situation for success in the small estuary group. And anyone who decides they want to sort of just go out and start a group, you're not just gonna, put up a shingle and have 6, 8, 10, 12 people that are going to be willing to come there every month or every 2 weeks or every week or anything like that. That's certainly true. But one woman in the estuary group that I joined brought a friend to the conference who didn't know anything about any of this stuff and was sort of on the new atheist spectrum and was a bit appalled and horrified at what John Vervaeke and Jonathan Peugeot had said about the new atheists. And so she was a little concerned because she had sort of leveraged her influence as a friend to bring this person to this conference. And then, basically Vervaeke and Peugeot say that, the new atheists were, they were dead in the water even when they were popular because they have nothing to stand on. That sort of set the person. Now, that was the first day that she said this. And it would be good to sort of circle back to her and find out from her friend what she thought of. And part of the difficulty I think we have is I hear all these glowing reports from hardcore TLCers for whom this was, they saw their friends, they had an estuary experience, they saw their favorite speakers. And while Grim Grizz gave a little, his own little review of the conference or, best practices or things we could improve on that video he made, Sam noted that, they might send out a survey to get a sense of how well did that work. And I would love to hear more from people who went to this thing with no knowledge or even counter alignment to at least some of the main speakers there, and to find out what their experience in the estuary group was. Now, I'm quite amazed, though, that we ran something like 35 groups. And for the most part, I heard really glowing reviews. And for me, that's an astounding outcome.
Yeah, and I was really pleased by that too. And I had the same experience. The feedback I got from people in my group, there were quite a few there also, or several who had never been in an estuary, so this was a whole new experience for them. The maybe they already have access to like-minded people and a group that they can gather, and they can simply employ the protocol, and they're well on their way. But for those who think that they're just going to put an ad out somewhere in some local town and say, if you know about Jordan Peterson and you know about Paul Vanderklay, come to a meeting on Tuesday night at 7 o'clock, and we're going to talk about life together. And no, I don't know who Paul Vanderklay is. I don't know who Jordan. I barely know who Jordan Peterson is. And so I'm thinking about, the way that Dale Zelstra did it in his church, where he simply tells his Sunday school class, we're going to do things a little different. And then they discover that they really like the estuary protocol, and they actually can become more closely connected. They can become better friends. They can be authentic about their genuine real life issues, and they can share one another's burden, and have a little bit more of a connection, a real life connection with one another. And you have that in your weekly estuary on Sunday mornings too. So that is kind of a natural affinity where you can gather the group some other way. But if you're going to gather the group from scratch and you don't have those kind of connections, and you have in your mind that you can somehow find all these people who are like the ones at the conference. So if you use the people that were at the conference as your representative demographic, I always love the way you use the word normies, because those are not it. These are a unique group of people that have unique connections, either to speakers or to the internet or to channels. And so if you're going to gather a group of people in your local town, and you live somewhere in St. Louis, Missouri, or in, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, there may not be very many people there who have any awareness of what even happened in Chicago.
Yeah.
Or who you are, or they may not actually spend 14, 15 hours of watching videos, in a week. And so it's you have to figure out a different way to talk about, well, what are we going to talk about? Well, we're going to do life together, but you have to frame it in a different way than what gets talked about on your channel.
Yeah.
That's
I
my
think
point.
I think it would be good to do a little bit of research. We have some groups like her name was Elizabeth, who gave that amazing presentation on stage.
Emily.
Emily gave that amazing presentation on stage about estuary. These groups in New York City that started with zero connection to the TLC, but they grew out of
Choir.
church. What's that?
It was a choir.
Okay, a choir. So they grew out of a church context, and they were able to turn that into, a very different group, and a growing group that could grow outside the church. After the Sunday service at Faith CRC, I went out to lunch with the pastor, a couple of elders and the elders' wives, and we had a lovely conversation. And I had a chance to tell them about Estuary, and I think that church is actually seriously considering it. I think often pastors and churches sort of have their eyes wide open with respect to this. They have an understanding about how challenging it can be. It's even the case that when someone wants to start an estuary group, if they let me know and if I can get out there just to sort of at least draw some TLCers in, even if there've been a number of times where I've drawn a group of 40, 50 people just in a local setting and
just by showing up.
just by showing up. And it didn't necessarily mean that 20 people would reliably come there without me showing up to just do that. So it really is important that people understand that you start a group. We're very upfront that explaining the value of estuary to people is not an easy sell, just sort of describing it. It's something that kind of has to be experienced. And your group in Chino at Crosspoint is kind of an example of that because you've basically grown your group rather organically with
Three audiences. Yeah.
yeah, with you've got some input from the TLC, but you've got some input from the church and then some from just meetup.com or who come outside. Why don't you, for those people who are completely new to this thing, why don't you say a little bit about how Elsnet, what does that mean for one thing? Because like Estuary doesn't tell you what it is. Elsnet certainly doesn't tell you what it is. What Elsnet is and how that can help someone if they want to start a group.
Well, that is actually where two things happen. One is we practice the protocol so that people. I always tell them, when you start a group, you don't have to use the protocol, but it's nice to have one tool in your pocket that you can reliably use to conduct a meeting and to host a conversation. So we do that, and then among the topics that we discuss, that includes some detailed exchange of information and sharing experience among people about some logistical things like venue planning and timing. This is where I usually give my spiel about if it's not on the calendar, it's not happening. So, make sure you have a fixed location, a fixed date or schedule, every first and third Tuesday at 7:00, fixed time so that you don't have to get on WhatsApp and have to find out who is all available, then we'll have the meeting then. I noticed with great interest that the folks in Holland also went to a fixed time and date for their estuary. They were trying to get these meetings organized randomly on random dates whenever people could get together. That doesn't work because then you really you can't really plan for it. But then on the Elsnet is the Estuary Leader Support Network. So what it is, you go to estuaryhub.com, you can sign up to participate. As soon as you do, you'll be the recipient of a twice monthly reminder with the link to the Zoom session that we use. We use Zoom for that. And it's not recorded. It's not live streamed. There is no hive mind that is commenting on the side what we really should be talking about, but aren't. And I'm sorry.
I gave John the option of live streaming this, and John's like, I hate the hive mind. So don't be offended out there. But Bandong hates the hive mind.
Well, you cannot even hear yourself think with all the jabbering on the side. So there's that, and you're used to it. You're ADD, so I'm not. So anyway, then what we like to think of ourselves as doing is providing people with all the resources necessary to start and run a group. There's a manual that we put together and printed. It's a PDF format. You can download it and print it for yourself, or not. You can put it on your phone if you like. But there's some specific information there about what, why, where, and how much, and all of that. And then these sessions, what they do is they give you a little bit of an opportunity, and some people come twice, three times. Some people stay for a long time. They really, if there's any level of discomfort about doing this live, in their own community, they will at least have had some experience with the rhythm and getting to know different people and find. And then the one thing that we have just recently added, only about 3 months now, I think, is that we give every participant the opportunity to lead the online session, and then 15 minutes before the end, we call the conversation to an end, and then we use the last 15 minutes to provide some feedback. How they're doing. Whether they seem comfortable or tense or talk too much or too little or whatever. Whatever the group feels like would be helpful to point out, and then in a very non-threatening, safe context, people can gain some experience how to run a group, and that has proven to be quite helpful to different people. So yeah, I know that groups exist, the leaders of which I never see anymore, but I know that they learned their tricks on Elsnet.
Yeah, yeah. And anything else about expectation adjustment you want to communicate, or I'd like to talk about conference formation and sort of the whole conference side of the ecosystem too.
Right. Yeah, we can get to that in a minute, but I really want to encourage people to find a way to communicate, or to, first of all, believe and accept the fact that there are as many people who are lonely and have a need for connection or want to be seen and or heard, and who would love to be part of a group of people that meets regularly for meaningful conversation outside the TLC and the channel and the conference community than within. There are people like that in every town in significant numbers. It's just that there is no mechanism for bringing them together. And that's why I always say meetup.com is designed to do just that in every location.
Yeah.
Now, it's expensive and it doesn't even always do the trick. But if you can get a picture on your website that has 4 people from meetup.com, and you put that picture on meetup.com, then you can create some kind of momentum on meetup.com. Meetup.com, of course, is the place where you go if you don't know what to do on Tuesday night and you want to do something with people like you, and you want to go either bike riding or crocheting or have a book club or do a cooking class together. All these different ways that people gather for a specific activity, and then you just put yourself on that list, and the people that are on meetup.com, they get notified, and then that's how they can learn about your group.
Yeah.
I mean, people are welcome to use my meetup.com page, cut and paste and change the wording, and use it for your template. That's fine with me.
I think groups have had uneven results from meetup.com, both in terms of non-response. It is expensive. And also sometimes the people that come in from meetup.com they're even more rando than randos. And so I think people should also consider all existing relational networks.
Right. I agree.
I think churches are good places to start this, partly because churches often have empty rooms during the week. Churches usually have people who are experienced and skilled in small group leadership. Many of those skills are transferable to leading an estuary group. And not just church relationships, but other relationships sort of peripheral to church or friend groups. The estuary protocol, I think part of its real use is that it can help groups that get a little stale, talk about the same old thing or doing the same old format, or maybe, even in a church, it might be a Bible study that's sort of bogged down, maybe just by some of the own dynamics in it. Estuary can sort of open it up a little bit and give people a chance to talk about some things they'd really like to talk about. Despite the fact that I've had very, very limited success in talking pastors into this, I continue to encourage pastors to think about estuary groups as an excellent pastoral care tool. And we had to the best of my knowledge, we had three CRC pastors participate fully at the conference. And one of those was the pastor at Faith CRC. And I think he's quite interested in this. And I appreciate the fact that pastors tend to be very busy people, and they can have a fairly as they sometimes need to do a fairly mercenary attitude with respect to time commitments. I mean, if they're going to say every Wednesday night or every Sunday morning, or, when a pastor sort of puts something in the ground at a time and space, that's really hard on a pastor because we already have that certain other times of the week with meetings, with Sunday things, with maybe midweek programming. So, I know that's really hard, but again, I've found Estuary to be a tremendous tool for churches. And Dale Zylstra, who's been on the channel, I think can bear that out. It's and as the women from New York City have shown that it's something that can really breathe life into a choir group or some other kind of group where, let's say, the people want to take a group that's sort of a surface level of people who know each other a little bit and then use it to deepen that group and
Yep.
help build the relationships, because often you might sense that, okay, we all go to choir together and we all sing together, but if we just show up to do the choir practice and then sing the songs and whatever we do, and we're sort of shoulder to shoulder with each other, I think it'd be nice to have something to sort of help them then become much more of a community where they can support one another. So,
So about that, the catalyst of that transition actually turned out to be a tragic moment when the president of the choir passed away, and they really felt a need to kind of process that in some kind of bereavement group setting kind of thing. And this is, I think, where the girls felt that they really wanted to offer something to the members of the choir, and that then grew into the New York Estuary, which is now extremely successful. But I also was going to mention to you that in addition to the church adjacent estuary that we have at Crosspoint Church, I've also been asked by the pastor of discipleship to run an additional estuary in-house for church members only. And I always like to say that whereas estuary is the mutually respectful conversation across ideological lines, for that in-house estuary group, it's going to be mutually respectful conversation across perspectival lines, because while we have some kind of confessional alignment in that we're all members of the same church, that nevertheless, leaves room for all kinds of different perspectives on different things, whether they be political or church practices or whether you homeschool your kids or send them to the Christian school or not. All these kinds of questions cannot necessarily always be comfortably discussed in any kind of depth in a regular Bible study. But the thought is that we're going to do that then on the opposite Tuesday. So I actually will be committed every Tuesday night except the fifth Tuesday night. But to your point about whether the pastor himself is able to commit to something like that, I think that most pastors would be able to point to a person who would enjoy leading a group like that, so that they don't necessarily have to make that permanent commitment themselves. I mean, you do that, Dale Zylstra does that, but none of the pastors at my church are particularly eager to run a group like that. They have other fish to fry, so they get their groupie John, and now I get to do it.
Well, Nate Hiles, pastor up in, he does it too. So there are a
Oh, that's
few of
right.
us.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
There
yeah.
are a few of us, but again, I think it's a tremendous tool. So, well, maybe if we're when we're ready to pivot to conferences, maybe actually I'll stop this recording and start a new recording so I can have two shorter videos on this topic instead of one long video, because that way I can sort of title these videos much more to so you'll want to start an estuary, and then and the other one maybe so you'll want to start an estuary conference.
Very
We can
good.
talk
Yeah,
about
I
that.
like that. Yeah, it's very
All
good.
right. Any last words on so you want to start an estuary?
No, I think that I still totally encourage people to search out every opportunity. Maybe the one more piece of advice is to find one friend to whom you can explain the thing, so you can kind of come at this as a team. The 2x2 concept, well known in evangelism and small group development and new church planting and all that, is a valid concept also in Estuary. If you have a partner with whom you can commiserate when things go bad and go get a stiff drink if nobody shows up, and that, I highly recommend that you find a friend and do this thing together with somebody.
Yeah, that's
But
really
do
good
it.
advice.
Just do it. Do it.
Just do it. All
Put
right.
it on the calendar.
Put it on the calendar. Use meetup.com, use existing social networks. And
Come to Elsnet, get trained.
yeah, be persistent, and it can, it can really work. Just like a lot of good things in life, if you want to do it, it'll take a little work. So good. All right, I'm going to stop this recording then. And for those of you who want to know more about conferences, there's another
Stay
video,
tuned.
and we're wearing exactly the same clothes that we're wearing here.
I can quickly change my shirt.
Such a difficult Dutchman. Such a difficult Dutchman.